Okay, welcome once again. My name is Winifred Ngabirwe, and we're going to be talking about a study. We're launching a study that was conducted by PWYP members in Uganda, in Tanzania, and Mozambique. And we have today representatives from the three countries that are going to be speaking to us. We have interpretation in English and Portuguese. And we also have our comments section open, so you can drop in whatever you want in the chat room. And we'll read that and give you feedback if it's a question, pass it on to the panelists so that we can have an engaging discussion. So today we have Nelly, who is the member of the engagement manager for Africa, PWYP. And we also have colleagues from Tanzania. We have Flaviana, who's going to be speaking to us. We have Charles from Uganda. I hope Charles and Robert are online with us, if they can just say hi. And we also have colleagues from Mozambique. I hope that they have been able to join. So if our colleagues from Mozambique are able to join us, please say hi, and then we start officially. We have been waiting for you. Velasco, are you around? Are you in?
Yes, I'm in.
Welcome,
hello.
welcome.
Thank you.
Nelly, are you in?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. Charles, how are you? Where are you?
Flaviana is here. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Flaviana. And also, do we have Charles Topoth from PWYP Uganda?
It's Robert who will be in Charles's place.
Okay. Is the interpretation going well? Can we confirm that before we start?
Hi, I'm comfortable in English. It's okay for me.
Okay, thank you. So Nelly, I'm going to give you just 5 minutes to quickly tell us, about this report that we are launching, how important it is, and how it fits within the broader PWYP strategy for gender and gender engagement and extractive.
Right. Thank you, Winnie. As people join, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Winnie. As we get more participants to join, I'm just like to welcome all of you to this afternoon webinar. It's probably morning in some areas, but in some countries. But to welcome you all and thank you so much for taking time to join us. We've come a long way. This particular piece of work has been in the works for maybe about 2 years now. And I'm really excited that it has come to this stage and we're able to share some experiences, share some learnings in different forms. And so we are really, really glad and happy to have all of you join. And please, if some of your colleagues haven't joined, please share with them the link and they'll be able to get a link to join. But particularly also, it's just to express our deepest sympathies, I guess, and condolences to the Mozambique team. Last week we met to share and celebrate really Camilo, who was part and parcel of this project, and he would have been here, I'm very sure, to share the work they did in respect to gender. So thank you to the Mozambique team for really coming together and sharing with us during this time. So very quickly, I'm just going to go over really, it's just an overview of where we've come from and where this work falls and some of the complementary efforts, I guess, with some of my colleagues at the Secretariat. My name's Nelly Businje. If I haven't introduced myself officially, I'm called Nelly Businje. I am based in Kampala. I work with the International Secretariat as the Member Engagement Manager for Africa. and I've had the privilege to coordinate this particular project that was supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Finland. And we've been working with our colleagues in Tanzania, Mozambique, and Uganda since 2019 when we started. This particular project was looking at promoting the equitable and transparent generation and allocation of extractive revenues for sustainable development. We looked at implementation on 2 fronts at national level in Mozambique, Uganda, and Tanzania, and then also regionally within the Eastern Southern Africa region, and really collaborating with our partners at the regional level. And of course, globally sharing the learnings and the efforts that were being made by this particular work. And generally, the entire project was looking at 4 outcomes, and information and analysis available to stakeholders on tax generated by extraction of oil, gas, and minerals, key ministries and governance agencies in countries, targeted countries, committing to fiscal reforms in the extractive sector, and then also women's effective participation in the decision-making processes on how, whether, and how revenues from extractives are located in subnational budgets. And then also there was the bit around enhanced coordination and information sharing on tax justice in the extractive sector among civil society. And this was done even at national level, regional, and global. So, but the focus of our webinar today is really around the women's effective participation in decision-making processes that we looked at as part of this project. And this one, really, the project did quite a bit of work, research, advocacy, and mobilizing communities around these issues. And so each of the countries that were implementing this particular project, that is Uganda, Tanzania, and Mozambique, were able to carry out research on these particular issues. And it was defined in their own way. If we can please mute Charles, yes. It was defined, in their context and the like, but still really the overarching issue was looking at, the issues around participation and decision-making. So the report, really the overarching issue here is that women are entitled to meaningful participation and voice around the allocation and use of extractive revenues. And these revenues should be able to benefit women, men, communities, and all the work that comes with that. And so there were quite a number of issues that were looked at, and I'm not going to get into the detail of it because each of the countries is going to share some key findings and issues and recommendations that came out of the work that they did. But really, it's just to focus on just some of the sort of cross-cutting issues and some of the lessons that we captured overall that were cutting across these 3 countries, especially on what's restricting participation of women in decision-making processes, the issues around women's social status, the customary patterns that shift social behavior of women and men, so that limits their participation. And of course, it begins to disenfranchise women, especially when they're participating in decisions related to extractives, especially for extractive revenues. And then another issue that we saw that was the governance frameworks are not really ensuring women's voice or participation. So you'll find that, and I'm sure my colleagues will talk about that, the constitution in country A, all these 3 countries, provides for women's participation and all that, and the subnational frameworks do that. But to the extent of which women can really voice their opinions is still lacking. And issues around transparency and all that are still lacking. So generally, I think it's us to come together in this webinar and have a conversation on these issues and share our experiences and stories, and also look at the recommendations on how we take this forward beyond these reports. So I think I'll stop here, Winnie. Sorry if I've taken too much time, and I give it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nelly, for that brief. And so I'll just quickly ask our colleagues from Uganda, Tanzania, and Mozambique to share. Flaviana, we'll start with Flaviana. What did you find in the project? What did the research tell us in terms of, do we have women at the table? Are they making decisions, or are they on the menu when we look at the table? What can we do to make sure that we have women influencing how decisions to extract, how decisions to invest the money that comes from our revenues made, but also generate. We have got from our oil, from our mining, from our resources that we have. Flaviana, you have about 10 minutes, please, if you can share with us the experiences in Tanzania and the results that you get from the project.
Thank you so much, Winnie. Sorry, I've put off my video so that I can have a stable internet. Yes, thank you so much for you guys organizing this important meeting. And thank you for publishing what you pay for supporting us, particularly Hafila Simali as a chair, vice chair of the board. I have obligation to say thank you so much and God bless you. So going back to the findings.
Flaviana, do you want to be a little bit louder than you are now?
Yes.
I think
can you hear me now? Am
yes,
I louder now?
You're better.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. Just mine was number one, just to thank you for organizing this important webinar, but also to thank Publish What You Pay for supporting us, and so that we can have this very important research in Tanzania. Now, going back to our research and findings, because of the shortage of time, I will just touch on very, very important issues which we have found in Tanzania. Number one, which I think is common to everyone, that Tanzania mining sector actually is predominantly dominated by the male. So it's a male-dominated industry, whereby, and then it shows that the level of women participation in the sector is quite low. And this is not discussable because it's not contested, because even data and even the figures and all the data show that. The number two, that the revenue, which is derived from various sources, including the mining sector or extractive industry, is always deposited in what we call consolidated funds. Now, this is also, again, is a matter of law and the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania. So once this money has been deposited on the consolidated funds, they think you cannot trace it, because the mandate to allocate the funds on the disbursements and how they can be used is raised down in the hands of the parliament and the ministry responsible. Now it depends on the, when you look at it, it depends now on the political will, but also on the people who are allocating. Remember I said that the extractive sector is male dominated. So all the guys who are actually deciding on how to allocate the funds, the revenue, are the men. And then we always say that the voice and the cries and the humiliation and suffering of the women can eventually be addressed by women themselves. And as Winnie, you said earlier, that being in the decision-making process is a process by itself. But if you're not in the table, then you're in the menu. So we find in this kind of scenario, most of the women, they're always in the menu, and hence they're eaten because they don't take part in the decision-making process. They don't take part in the planning. They don't take part neither in trying to determine their own fate. So you can find this is again, it's quite important to understand. So this money, once they are deposited on concentrated funds, now when they go there, they lose their identity. And once they lose their identity, then that time you can't find whether the women can do it. So the money is allocated in general, depending on the budget, allocations, the ceilings, and the boards, depending on the ministry priorities and what they want to cover first. So the women thing becomes not as a matter of discussion at that particular point in time. Again, when you look at an issue, so I can say that it's quite difficult and very challenging to identify as to what extent the distribution of funds or revenues goes to the different groups, particularly women. And because it's generally, the funds is allocated on general basis, not specific allocation for women. And then you find this when you look at it, especially when you're trying to find out if whether the women issues are being addressed, or there is a gender mainstreaming or budget analysis which is based on gender, you cannot even find that element of it. If you find it, it's quite layered. So you find that there is no specific allocation funds, which is like specifically to trace that this is for the women, for the women needs, to cover for the women needs. So now this is also another important thing which we've found, and this is pretty important, that most of the mining laws are gender blind. They are gender insensitive in some of them. You find that the police might stipulate a lot of good promises and put a lot of things, but when you go to the mother or the parent law, you don't find that. You find most of them, especially the Mining Act, is a completely gender blind. So the police doesn't have that power if that is not respected. The same is not respected in the law. So you find most of the time, it just ends up in being in the police and the paper police and everything. But when it comes to the implementation, it's not so much taken into account. But also it's very difficult to explore as to what is said, particularly on the local content and the CSR initiative. You find that the women from the local level, they're not involved, they're not even consulted. Though when you look at the new Local Content Act, it calls upon the women to be involved in this, but in most cases, not that. In practical aspect, it doesn't take place in that. And some of the areas when women are involved, these women are not empowered. So when they get there, even the mode of electing or choosing them, you just take a woman, just to know that woman who's there doesn't even know what is going to speak or is going to be presented within that kind of meeting. So you find that it's like a taking a box. So you can't even get that tangible result out of that kind of discussion. Now, another thing is we found the cultural issues and barriers still very strong. You can't imagine, and it's so devastating to find in a place like Tanzania, where we got our independence in 1961. Now, and the women were very much involved in the liberation of the country. But when you go to the mining sector, you find that men in that area still believe that when women they are in their period, they cannot go close to the mining area because they are regarded as a caste. Being in the period is a caste. That kind of belief still exists in some parts of Tanzania. And then you find that most of the women, they are neglected and sometimes denied their right to participate in the extractive industry or mining sector just because of that. That when they're in the period, they make that minerals get disappear and sort of thing. So you find this is another problem. And again, the issues of the value chain, women being involved from the beginning to you find most of the women, you find them very down there where they used to cook. We call mama ntilie, and they just very, very tertiary small things, but they're not involved in decision-making table as such. And remember, when you go to the event, the decision-making body, in the policies, in the laws, in the institutions, you find most of them men are more dominant in those areas. So you cannot even expect the men to decide in favor of the women if the women themselves are not there in the table. Now we have a few recommendations, and there are a lot of which I have shared the slides. I think you can share. But recommendation number one, we have recommended for the policy and legal and institution reforms to enhance women benefit from the mining sector, particularly on the revenue aspect of it. But also recommended for capacity kind of building. We need to enable women so that women themselves can start trying to forge the way to find out how they can be involved in this sector. Because sometimes if you're not invited, sometimes you bring your own chair in the table. So women have to start out. We need to build capacity of the women, to capacitate them so that they can start bringing the chairs in the decision-making tables. Otherwise, if you still wait for the men to bring you, they will never bring you because they are not interested. But also, they are in the decision-making body, so they don't feel like women are supposed to be there, particularly in the mining sector, and especially on the revenue issues, it's even worse. So we think we need this, but also we think we need also to continue trying to work with the members of parliament, because these are the decision makers, and we need to, as a hackers first, we need to advocate for them. So for that, to advocate for the change of laws and policies, but to ensure that every budget has some gender consideration. And we need to have, we are trying to advocate as well, ensure that we have gender mainstreaming aspect in every aspect of the sector, particularly in the country, within the Tanzania. Okay. So we're working on that, and we think. But lastly, I think I have a lot of them, but lastly, I think which is quite important is to make sure that this the government itself starts having that feeling that every women involvement is not a matter of choice, but it's a matter of necessity, because women are the one who are taking care, and they are contributing a lot to the development. And we have figures in that which show that women have over the years contributed a lot to the development. Their contribution are neglected, either deliberately or well, just by negligence. So we think we need to start working on that and ensure that women also, they are involved in decision-making body, but also they are considered as an integral part of contribution to the development of the country. I think my minutes are out, but I'm ready for the questions, and the slide has a lot of recommendations. We can take them on board. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Flaviana. And I really hear you. You're mentioning how the sector, extractive sector, is really male-dominated, and particularly the mining sector. But we also know that the sector, generally mining, oil and gas, worldwide, they don't employ more than 20. That 20% of the employees are women. The rest are, the 78 point something are all male, and that just tells you how male-dominated the sector is. You also mentioned, issues to do with the physical regimes and the framework. Once money goes into the consolidated fund, it's hard to trace. It's up to parliamentary allocations, and you really cannot tell whether this money has gone into services and goods and providing whatever it is that would have benefited women and uplifted them from the state in which they are. And you also rightly mentioned our mining laws, they are gender blind, and I hear you, and I think most people hear you. The laws that we have sometimes really promote the discrimination that we see in practice by government officials, by company officials, but also by even ASMs who are in there. The laws are not favorable to make women enjoy and have a productive investment in the sector. And you also mentioned, of course, local content. How much money do women have for them to be able to tap into the opportunities, for them to be able to be contractors or subcontractors providing goods and services within the sector? And you have given recommendations. You're challenging that being at the table does not necessarily mean that women are influencing, but you're also saying that our parliamentarians, the people we elect to represent us, should do more than they are doing in Tanzania and probably in Uganda or Mozambique, as we might hear. So thank you very much for that. I see there are a number of comments in the chat, if you can access them, but I'm going to request colleagues from Uganda, is it Charles or Robert, if you could just use 8 minutes to give us the findings, and if there's anything that Charles Flaviana has mentioned already, please do not mention that as number one. First mention all the other new points, then you can go back to those ones if we still have time. So Robert and Charles, you have 8 minutes to give the Ugandan perspective. Robert, there's a lot of echo coming from your side. You want to step away from the radio or whatever equipment that is near you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Can hear you now.
Yes. Uganda, we did research on the assessment on the role and the level of participation of women and in allocation of extractive revenues. And we did this in Karamoja. And the short background of this of the study is that the artisanal mining in Uganda is now not is informal, but all the same, there are revenues that the government gets from this sector. So the research we did, as I indicated, we did it in Karamoja, and we had the following objectives: to identify and explore hidden and undocumented aspects of gendered impacts of the extractives of women in Karamoja, examining different forms of mining revenues and the challenges existing in the collection and management and allocation, and assessing the role of women and their level of participation in mining revenue collection, management, and allocation, and examining the extent at which mining revenues benefit women in Karamoja. This research, we did it specifically in the districts of Moroto and Nakapilipiliti districts. We had focused group discussions and then key informant interviews from the miners themselves, government officials, civil society, mining companies, and also local leaders. The findings of the study, we discovered that the women participation, we looked at the issues as I indicated, whether the women participate in the allocation of the revenues. And we discovered that the revenues, the forms of revenues that are got include the income tax, the royalties, the mineral rent, the fees, local tax, and then compensation payments and the royalties. And then we were looking specifically at whether the women participate in the allocation of these revenues. And we discovered that some women are they are part of them, especially when you look at the local councils, the women are part of them. The committees are headed by women, especially in the districts, the LC3 councils. And then the women also have interest when it comes to the mining. Women are now mining, and they have interest. But overall, the women do not take a decision when it comes to the allocation, especially when you look at the national level, at the local level, and then at the national level, when it comes to the participation of women and also allocation of the revenues, basically the issues of gender are not very well looked at, especially in the national budget. And for example, when you look at the Ministry of Gender, is not brought very well, especially when it comes to the issues of transparency and accountability. For example, when you look at the EITI, the women, the Ministry of Gender is not very well pronounced, although the issues of gender are talked about in the international documents. So overall, women, they participate to a smaller extent in the allocation of resources, and to a smaller extent, especially when you look at the local level, they participate. But when it comes to also the companies, the associations and the companies, the women, the participation of women is less in that. So the key recommendation, we recommended that the mining bill, which is under review, should include provision relating to the issues of prior informed consent, and women should the role of women should be pronounced in the bill. And then the issues of income tax should provide incentives of mining companies when 30% of employees or workers are women. And then civil society organizations should strengthen their efforts in empowering mining communities, particularly women. So the recommendations we are giving is that when it comes to the issues of formalizing the mining sector, especially the small-scale mining sector, the women should be looked at, especially in the leadership and also the formation of companies, and also the issues of the EITI, the issues of women should be brought on the forefront. And also when it comes to the sharing of the revenues, the women, the issues of gender should be brought, and also at the national level when budgeting, the budgeting process, the issues of gender and particularly the issues of women should be brought, should be prioritized, especially when it comes to the extractive sector, because the women, for example, when it comes to mining, they are the ones who do a lot. They do a lot of work. Actually, they are the one. They participate a lot in producing the gold, and yet when it comes to sharing the proceeds, they participate less. So that's why we are proposing that in the roles in the mining bill, which is being revised, the issues of gender, the issues of women should be brought on the forefront.
Thank you,
so
Robert.
that benefit. Yes.
Thank you, Robert. I'll come back to you, but in the interest of time, I'm going to request that you first pause, and then we have hear from Mozambique. And then if we have any questions or if we still have time, we are going to get back to you, and then we can talk more about the findings in Uganda. Is that fine?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. But I hear you're mentioning how the women are in some leadership positions at local and national level, and that's where some decisions are done. But even when they're in those positions, their voices are not necessarily heard, or probably their views are not respected. But you also tell us that there's an opportunity in Uganda because of the current mining bill, which has opportunity to provide for environment, the legal environment that can facilitate women to mine, to invest in mining. And you also mentioned EITI. You're saying that while the Ministry of Gender is not necessarily involved, our reporting on the gender aspects in the EITI standard is probably going to challenge us to look at how gender is catered for in Uganda's mining sector. And of course, prior and informed consent, the role of women, and also suggesting that we should give companies quotas so that if they employ a certain number of women, then they're able to attract some benefits. Thank you very much for the findings and for the recommendations, which we can again discuss further in the Q&A session. But for now, I'm going to request Velasco from PWYP Mozambique to give us a highlight of what they found out in Mozambique, and also some key recommendations that they might have. I see in the chat room, people are mentioning issues to do with traditional beliefs. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with a group that is economically unempowered and you expect them to benefit from the mining sector? And also they're asking for the report. So Nelly, you will probably, when you're closing, tell us where participants can find that report. So let's go, please. You have 10 minutes to submit. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, okay, thank you. I'll talk about the participation of women and youth in decision-making process on the subnational level and the use of 2.75% of the revenues. So Mozambique, since the struggle, national liberation against colonial yoke, which lasted 10 years, Mozambique has resisted a massive participation of women. So they had ideology followed at that time by the guerrilla movement, ensured the absence of discrimination, and the men women joined the anti-colonial liberation struggle. Afterwards, men women organizations emerged at that time with different profiles, religious, peasants, not government, community, and even partisan. So their struggle for the emancipation and conquest of the more space are visible and continues until today. Since 2013, the budget law has fixed the percentage of 2.75% on mining production taxes, including the indication of the beneficiary communities. So however, the law does not argue and explain the formula for setting the percentage of 2.75 and how was done the prior indication and beneficiary communities. Both the allocation mechanism as well as the use of revenues has been questioned by the civil society and research about the effectiveness and impact on development of the livelihoods of the affected communities. Mozambique did the research in 2 provinces, Nampula and Teti. When we did this research, we had some limitations, as you know, the COVID, but we have some key findings also. The prioritized projects have been more to respond to the district development plans. And we have a policy also started in 2013, which defines the category of projects to be financed with which should be responsible for the government state on the state. So some infrastructures built under this percentage of 2.75 revenue have poor quality, and communities have not been involved in the process of selection and awarding works or contractors. And even to monitoring the implementation of the works, although some local civil society groups do so, but they encounter barriers, so the government doesn't allow them to participate. The communities, most of them, they suspect acts of corruption involving members of the district government and the contractors also. Through the government does a revenue allocation mechanism through the direct transfer to national treasury to the district governments within the scope of application of the general state budget law. So it has raised questions from the civil society and the research also. The law does not have information or criteria mechanism and formula for the calculation of sets this percentage or production tax. There is no identification or criteria also to indicate the selection of beneficiary localities. In other words, how are the affected communities should benefit from the 2.75? The model has the potential to create development asymmetries and inequalities between communities. And we are also scared of what is happening these days in Cabo Delgado. I guess you follow what is going on there. So this discrepancy of development of communities can also bring us some wars, we believe. So the election or the process of election of advisors councils also is not been in a right, is not done in right in right way. The representation of women, according to the law, must be the proportion of not less than 30%. And however possible, at least 40% of members of each level should be community leaders, and youth representation at least 20% must be guaranteed. This is what is written in the law, but in practice, it doesn't happen. So the community leaders are also confused because they have two roles. The attribution as arms of the state government by receiving orders from the above, and also they are representing communities. So this process is derived from the law that promotes dominance by community leaders. So the head of each local body can invite influential people to join the advisors council as the way to ensure the representation of different actors and sectors. We have some notes also in participation of women and youth people in decision making. There is a weak participation of women and younger people, both in numbers as well as in effective contribution to decision-making process. Theoretically, the decision-making on projects must be under the responsibility of local advisors council, but in practice, the final decision has been taken by the district government level. Both women and younger people are weak or unaware of their rights to participate in local advisory councils, despite their rights to participate in these decision-making bodies. And also have social, cultural, and religious factors and the gender relations and the role of women in maternal and paternal lineages. Low education coverage to the weak participation of women in public life. Women are still subordinate, submissive, confident to domestic duties, and they do not make decision making and family as well as in public sphere. So these norms that lead to gender inequalities prevent women's participation in decision-making process. And also younger people are refrained for participating in the decision-making process, particularly in this use of 2.75% revenue, because their concerns and the proposals have been relegated to the last plans.
You want to give us just a few recommendations and then
Yes. We recommend, the study recommend that to review both the percentage of 2.75% defined by the budget law, and the criteria also in the format should be revised in order to make them transparent. The review allocation and utilization mechanism via state budget consider the possibility of the hybrid form, example, through the mixed management community fund, government, communities, and civil society in order to guarantee inclusive and transparency. And also we recommend to accelerate the civic education of local communities in the participatory process, and the role of women and youth in the local development process through the production of and dissemination of information, training materials adapted to the local context, and produce also communication programs such as community radio and the drama programs, produce pamphlets in local language, and adapt all this information to local cultures. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Verisco. Thank you so much. You are so clear. I like the fact that you brought in the youth aspect, the young people. And I hear you when you're saying, the law does not explain the formula that we use to allocate and distribute revenues that are got from the industry. And also you're questioning where communities are when contracts are being negotiated. And also if they're not there to understand the content of the contracts, how then can they be able to monitor the same, to monitor what is happening in the communities, to understand whether contractors are meeting what they're supposed to be meeting, but also for communities to play the oversight role and question when the standards are not made. I'll also hear you're talking about representation. Even when people are at the table that we talked about, their skills set, their confidence levels, their knowledge levels may not necessarily allow them to effectively contribute. So the numbers is one problem, but also the few that are there need to be strengthened. They need to have their capacity up. They need to have more information. They need to have access to all these resources that would make them effective and be able to deliver on their mandates. And you do make a number of recommendations, reviewing the formula, having more information about it, but also opening up space for more actors to come on board, as well as understanding whose role is what in this whole development process. So thank you very much, our 4 panelists already that have shared. Nelly, Flaviana, Robert, and Velasco. And at this point, I'm going to ask Fatima from PWYP Senegal, if you are available, to just respond. Does this resonate with you? Is it the same? Is it different? Just give us your perspective in about 7 minutes. And when you're done, I will ask Mando Chiwandaponde from Oxfam, Zambia, to also talk to us whether this is what they see and how generally we can have our mining sector, our oil sector benefit the countries that we have talked about, but also benefit Africa generally. Thank you very much. So Fatima, please, you can have the microphone.
Oui, bonjour. Thank you, Winnie. Thank you, Nelly, and hi, everybody. Thanks to PWYP for organizing this, and congratulations to the team that carried the research. And thank you as well for the last presenters for the very relevant information about the different country. And I have to say, yes, it seems to what they have said is similar to what we experience here in the field of extractive. And it's quite common to see that the gap of knowledge, which many of the presenters have talked about, is a huge problem with women's benefiting from extractive sectors in the Francophone Africa in general, but maybe as well in Senegal, in Guinea, where I have worked extensively in the mining sector. And the main issue being really public participations of women. And I think someone has said it rightly in the chat, that is not about the physical participation, but the possibility to participate and influence the different processes. And it's not as well, I just want to talk about 1 or 2 questions I have seen as well. It's not only about a policy perspective or traditional norm perspective. I think that we are facing all across Africa the same issue when it comes to women and human rights generally, and that's the same problem when we talk about women and the extractive sector as well, policy perspective, and the traditional norm being one of the limitations have been in the narrative for many years, and it doesn't really, it's very difficult to change that. And for us, in terms of solutions and where we see our work going, is that we have to put a lot of effort as civil society, mostly in increasing women's knowledge through sensitizations and raising awareness, and as well reinforcing the capacity building of women, to allow them to participate meaningfully in all the public participation processes that are related to a mining or extractive sector, but as well to be able to be at the comfortable seats in order to contribute meaningfully in the different decisions that impacts their life, and at the same time as well working in building economic resilience for them, and as well legal empowerment for the different women in the different communities we work with. Because as you all know, be it here in West Africa or in other parts of Africa or just across the world, the impacts are always more drastic for women, but as well for young girls that are experiencing the hardship of mining activities, oil activities, and all the impacts of the extractive sectors on the environment. So they live the hardship in a very different way compared to the men, and that by itself is very difficult to see the men acknowledging it all the time. And there is a lot of situation where people don't see the difference between men and women when it comes to the hardship that is related to the negative impact of mining. We need to increase really the knowledge and reinforce the capacity in the different fields. We are about, for example, with Oxfam to start a main campaign where we will be campaigning in Senegal that all the revenue, at least 30% of the extractive revenue that is allocated to the local government to be dedicated to the gender sensitive project, or and as well to be dedicated to sectors that are relevant to women's life mostly, and as well to the involvement of youth in the development in general. And we hope that through that project we might be able as well to move things a bit. And the other point is that, talking generally about the region, we really very glad that we see the ECOWAS at the regional level, although we don't believe that it's just an issue of policy, but that at least there is a charter that is being adopted by ECOWAS, and the aim is to mainstream gender in the extractive sector at a regional level. And I know that many civil society organizations in the region have been involved in the process, including Oxfam, PWYP, and many other organizations in the region. And we see it as being one of the positive moves that maybe will help us see as well some way forward in order to improve the life and the living conditions of women when they face the negative impacts of mining and oil exploitations. And the other thing as well is that we talk a lot in our country right now, maybe about local content and social responsibility of companies, but we still need a more work and a grounded work in order to help women to be benefiting from local content and the different, the whole value chain of the mining, because the reality is that they have very, very little knowledge about mining operation from the beginning to the end. They don't really know very well how it goes, and they don't know what are the different mechanisms that can really help them be involved, even just in a very small activities that are related to local content. And maybe that this is as well an area where we can really work to help them maybe get more opportunities through local contents. Although I would say that personally, I have worked many years in Southern Africa, including in South Africa and in Zambia. And I don't believe that local contents is the solutions for Africa, but in any case, maybe is better than having nothing from the perspective of the community. So those are some ideas I wanted to share with you, and I'm here for if there is any question that that are related to what is happening in the West Africa. In the West Africa region or in Senegal, where I'm based right now. Thank you for listening and
Thank you so much, Fatima. And so we have a question in the chat, and someone is asking, we have discussed this subject of women participation for way too long. What is it going to take for it to be realized? As Mando, as you come to the discussion, please, are you able to speak to that? Share with us. So why do we have to discuss women participation from meeting A to meeting B to meeting C, and we keep saying the same things over and over? I don't know whether that's true or not, but I ask you to kindly share your perspective on that. Welcome, and want to hear your views, but also the views of Oxfam Zambia in what has been presented, and if there's any other new information that you may want to present to us. You have about 5 minutes to do that.
Hi, Winnie. Thank you very much for having me. I hope that you can hear me clearly, just to get confirmation.
Yes, we can hear you really, really well.
Okay, I will attempt to respond to the question that was asked around participation. I think, yes, that's something that's emerging and it's always coming out in the conversations that we have. But then how do we ensure it? I think there's some very key examples that are coming out of the Zambian context of how we've tried to remedy that situation in certain decision-making spaces around the EI, and I'll speak to some of those. But probably first of all, to thank PWYP for inviting me to this platform. This is a very cardinal conversation that we're having, and there's so many great ideas coming out of this, and it's important to have this dialogue going forward to ensure that we are all working towards a change. From all the presentations that have been given prior, I think something is coming out really clearly, and that's that there's a similarity in context. So the issues that are coming out of many countries are much the same. We have a very evident male dominance in the EI in most African countries, or across most African countries. And this is perpetuated by social and cultural norms, which remain a challenge to shift in our very traditional context. So Africa has a very traditional context, and the EI also is affected by that. So we have a situation where now we have these social and cultural norms inhibiting women's participation in the sector. And that has been largely the difference between they're getting a benefit from it or completely not getting a benefit from it. And this also goes to show just how deeply embedded the reluctance to address women's rights issues in the EI, or even just consider them, has been. So in the emerging conversation, of course, we start to see some of the more structural and policy gaps that my colleagues have spoken to, and a lack of gender disaggregated information from the sector is something that's coming out, a lack of the right policies in place, and also a lack of willingness to implement some of the very good policies that we have in place already around ensuring that women's rights are addressed within the sector. So I would resound every one of the recommendations that have been made by my colleagues. In the Zambian context, things haven't been much different. One of the major challenges that we've encountered is ensuring that women's rights and gender justice are advanced within the EI through women voices. So I've been privileged to work with a number of CSOs, and that's towards the same. So one of the things that's coming out really clearly for us is that there's a link between availability of gender relevant data and women inclusion in the EI decision-making space. And the reason given for the non-involvement of women is the lack of knowledge on technicalities of the sector by women and women's rights organizations, and also a lacking in the area of information from the sector, especially gender disaggregated data that should ideally fuel advocacy to advance women's rights and also their involvement within the sector itself. So this is also, I should note, despite there being already guidance from the EITI to have more gender disaggregated data from mining sector players. In Zambia, we do not have much of that given according to this provision. So now I'll speak to some of the things that we've been doing in the Zambian context to ensure that there is a response in terms of ensuring women are well represented and are also being included in decision-making spaces in the EI. So the response from CSOs in Zambia has really been to take to advocacy around key decision-making spaces, such as the EITI MSD. And there we've been able to start conversation on gender and women's rights within the extractive industry with the aim of two things. The first one being a gender-balanced EITI MSD, where we'll have clear representation of women's rights in the space, as well as advancement of gender justice within the entire sector itself. A second one would be to meet the gender reporting and data disaggregation requirements that are coming out of the EITI guidance, and that provide for disaggregation of gender by data. So that's employment data, project by project data, that clearly gives an indication of what the gender considerations within that are. So in addition to this, CSOs have also been able to contribute to ensuring gender consideration in the discourse around legislation of the EITI in Zambia. So earlier this year, we've had the Ministry of Mines share a draft of the Extractive Industry Transparency and Accountability Bill, and we've been able to input on that. Following the change of the government in Zambia, and I think the political situation, this hasn't been concluded, but we're hopeful and optimistic of having a way forward in that area. CSOs have also responded to the knowledge deficiency. I had mentioned before that one of the reasons given for non-involvement of women is that they're not very knowledgeable about the sector in terms of the very technical bits of it. And I think the EI is very, very technical. So this has inhibited women's meaningful contribution to the EI discourse. And now there's a commitment to capacity build these women in these spaces. So one specific initiative I could point to is actually by PWYP Zambia, which I was a part of. And this one is looking to engage women within the extractive space in a capacity building initiative to just learn about some of the more technical aspects of EI work, and thereon build a voice, a female voice that's going to speak up on these issues and also adequately represent the rights of women and gender justice in the extractive industry. So we've realized that to fundamentally change what the scenario looks like in Zambia, there's some things that we need to keep doing. The first one was to create spaces for women and women's rights organizations to participate in essential decision-making in the EI. And that's what we've been trying to do with trying to create spaces for women participation on the EITI MST. Of course, this also needs to happen at the local level, where women should be included in any other decision-making spaces. And that's something that we hope to see actualized. The second one is to ensure that they have the right information, that's gender disaggregated data, which is easily accessible to them. And with this, they're able to lead an evidence-based advocacy to advance the rights of women and gender justice in the EI. The third one is to ensure their meaningful participation in the decision-making spaces through capacity building. So this is something we've already started on, and it's something that we hope to keep doing so that we can continue to advance women's rights through the women's voice coming out of the EI. There's much to be done, of course, going forward, and it's not going to just take some of the efforts by civil society, but concerted efforts from all stakeholders, including the government and private sector players, to ensure that we have the right change. I think probably those are some things that will not just apply to Zambia, but can be applied across other countries. So need for a lot of cross-learning, need for continued conversation around this. And yeah, I think those are the ideas I can offer for the Zambian side where I am. Thank you very much, Winnie.
Thank you so much, Mando. So there are a number of comments in the chat room. Some, indicating exactly what we have discussed and giving us more information. Some suggesting different recommendations, but also some asking. For example, someone says, if not participation, what else should be done? And makes me think, I think every civil society meeting, the word participation, the word inclusiveness, the word, empowering would be thrown around. But what do these words actually mean in real terms? What does participation mean? I am opening up the question and answer session. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and tell us whom you're asking. We have Flaviana from Tanzania, we have Robert from Uganda, and we have Valesco from Mozambique. Please raise your hand and we'll pick you and we can hear your question. Robert, are you asking or you're responding to something? Robert, I see your hand up. Are you asking? You just presented. So are you asking or you're clarifying? Or you're
not asking. I'm waiting for the questions.
Okay, do you want to put your hand down?
Yes.
Thank you. Please, if you have any questions, please let us know. We want to have a conversation and get more information. But for me, it's really to ask the Publish What You Pay, members. We have gotten all this information. What do we want to do with it? I've had people telling us what is happening at ECOWAS. I know others have said there's something being worked on at the national legislation, but also we know that the Africa Mining Vision really talks about gives us a very, very good picture of what mining could do for Africa. So as a coalition, as people that have worked on extractives for a long time and still have many years to work on the subject, what are we thinking of doing with such information that we get from very good reports from the 3 countries? Maybe something that Nelly can speak to us about, or any Publish What You Pay member can suggest on how this report does not become one of those documents in your folder on a cabinet somewhere.
Winnie, there is a hand up from Evans.
I can see that. Yeah.
In the attendees section.
Okay.
Maybe either Ernest or Riska can give him room to
and allow them to speak. Okay. Evans, please go on.
Riska, are you able to give Evans to open to?
I'm trying.
Okay. Or Ernest, if it's easier. But while Riska or Ernest does that, there was a question, I think, for Winnie. There was a question in the chat. I don't know if it was seen, but there was a question, I think, for Fatima. And I think if I didn't get it wrong, I think it was directed to the last statement Fatima made on local content. I think she kind of said that she doesn't believe in it per se. But I think Shania was asking, if not local participation, if I got it right, what do you recommend? But Shania, you're free to put up your hand and ask the question directly. Evans is able to talk now, I think.
Yes, I'll also unmute Shania if she wants to ask the question.
All right, over to you, Winnie.
Okay, so I see Evans' hand is up, and Shania, if you're able to ask, please do you want to ask after Evans has spoken? Thank you. Evans, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for this discussion. It is very timely, but also very reminiscent of what has been discussed for so many decades within our cycles, the civil society organizations working on the extractive industry. Now, hello?
Where are you asking from?
I am in Tanzania. I work for a small organization called Foundation for ASM Development. We are working with partners in the ASM sector. And I think that I just need to address this. I have posted some questions in the question and answer section, and I see that no one is attending to them. So I'll ask this. We have for so many years been talking about traditional norms and practices that impede women's participation in social, economic, ventures fully. Now, the question that I have for those who are the panelists, are we really sure that we want to continue talking about traditional norms, or are we going to look at alternative ways in which we can actually address marginalization of women within the landscape of the sector? That's one question. The second question I have is, does marginalization depend solely on policy issues? And if it is on policy issues, do we think that we have depleted all the options and alternatives on approaches that we are using? The third question that I think that has been talked about over and over and over again is the whole issue of empowerment. We are talking about empowering women, but I'm wondering, one, do we consider the type of women who are actually involved in the extractive sector landscape? Who are we dealing with? Have we actually analyzed the main players within the extractive industry when it comes to the participation of women? Are they the most educated and sophisticated people like you and I who are actually discussing this here online today? Are they people with a certain level of education who have also, people who have a certain level of education who need a different approach of empowerment that would actually make them thrive within their context as far as the extractive industry is concerned? And the other thing, when we are talking about policies, a number of African countries have now introduced the local content policy. How is this being taken down to the people? How is it being taken down to the people? Recently, actually, we had a discussion. We are trying to partner with UNDP, and we were talking about empowerment. And a question was raised, and I'm raising this question here again, and I'm stressing on this. What type of empowerment are we talking about? Are we trying to bring an empowerment approach that is actually forcing these women to change their type of understanding and lifestyle? Are we trying to meet them from where they are so that we grow with them together? We bring them to a level where they can understand these sophisticated and highly elite thoughts that we actually express when we meet in these meetings. So basically, let me finalize by saying that, by recommending that even though there's a lot of good material out there, another one has just been added on the list in the name of this report, which is being launched today. I think that we need to go back to the drawing board, look at all the researches that we have done, and assess whether our approach to empowering women has actually marginalized them even further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your provocative submission. I hope we'll have a chance to reflect on what you have just asked, and also for panelists to give us some feedback. But Shenai, please go on and ask your question, but also if you can respond some of the issues that Evans has raised, that would be great. And after that, we'll have Velasco responding as well. So Shenai, please. Evans, please lower your hand if you're done.
Thank you so much, Winnie. So I think on my side of things, I was just curious to hear, and I guess this kind of picks up a little bit from Evans's comment, because one of the speakers had indicated that they are not of the view that local content is the best way to empower women. So I was curious to know what she proposes, what alternatives she has. And this, I think this would be interesting, just also within the context of Eva's question. And then I wanted to just, there was a question posed about the fact that, we are continuously having these conversations, but to what extent are we actually seeing change? I think it's so important for us to not be, what's the word? To lose sight of the long-term goal, right? A lot of the transformations we have seen in our society, right? Whether it's equality, from a gender perspective, a racial perspective, etc., have taken time. And I think it's important to recognize that we need to take a long-term perspective to the work that we do, because we will not see 50% of women sitting on, for example, certain spaces tomorrow, but progress is something to be celebrated, I think, as we do so, and these conversations contribute to that. So I think it's important to just also have that context as we recognize this particular issue that we're advocating for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Parma, do you have contribution to make? Hello. Yes, Velasco, do you have?
Yes. My last recommendation, I was saying that we have to accelerate the civic education for local communities and the participatory process. I will give an example of Mozambique. We have a mushroom of community radios. I'm saying a mushroom because there's more than 100 or 200 community radios. And that radios, they tailor programs in local languages. What we need is to address programs related to extractive industry, as well as we need to do a training in gender issues for both men and women, and involve community leaders, religious leaders, because they have a big role. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nelly has shared the link to the report. There were a couple of questions around that. So Nelly has shared the link in the chat room. And I guess you can also tell us how else, if people don't get it here, where else do we find these reports? Are there country reports? Flaviana, yes. Robert, if you could just tell us how to access the reports.
I think we'll give information at the end before we close. Fatima, I think, wants to say something before you go back to the hands. Winnie.
Okay, Fatima, please. Do you still have,
sorry,
do you want to share?
Yes, my mic was off. Thank you very much. I think, and thanks to, I think it's Robert or Evans for the very provocative comments. I think indeed many of the questions he raised, we naturally asked ourselves, are we not lost as civil society in what are we supposed to do? Because we feel like we have tried to do a lot when it comes to capacity building, when it came to empowerment, and when it came to many initiatives, and maybe yet we are not seeing the result we are expecting. But I think, as one of just the previous speaker said, progress is something that comes as a process. I mean, it's not something that we will see all the women just will be, their life will be changing just from night to day. But the work we are doing is worth celebrating. And at the same time, I think we are every day trying to see the best way to empower. And he said, how do we empower women? Who do we empower? And I think all of the women can be empowered, but the less privileged one need really to capture our attention. And sometimes they are not the women who are like working already in the extractive sector. It's not about occupational rights of women, but it's more about maybe women that are in the communities and that are facing on a daily basis very drastic impacts of the mining sector and the different extractive activities. that are surrounding them, and sometimes they are just voiceless and there is nothing they can do. And in that sense, if you work with women and you see them through time changing, then you think that empowerment is very important. In our different projects, we have seen women that in the beginning of the process, even if they are only with civil society, they don't speak, they don't try to involve themselves in what's going. They are just here and standing and looking what's happening. But through time, when you continue trying to empower and sensitize them and raise awareness, you see them at the moments where they change from just a passive actor to an actor that is really trying to be very active in their community, and they became themselves like those who have to empower other women. And that's a very wonderful process to witness. And we have seen it in many occasions when we work with communities that are impacted in mining, both here in Senegal, but before as well in Guinea. And other thing is about local content. I think someone have raised, yes, if we challenge local contents, then maybe we will have to come with a better alternative. The only point is that we have seen many research reports here in Senegal for more than a decade that have advocated local contents and social corporate social responsibility being an alternative. And as many initiatives maybe have been even been undertaken for that, but then we still fail to see where it's leading. Is it really something that can solve certain problem? I think we have, while we are working on the extractive, you have as well to have another understanding of what economic development means for those communities. And sometimes is to help them build resilience in other sectors that are there, like agriculture, like fishing, like other activities that help them to be economically resilient in front of mining companies. And that changed the narrative in some communities we are working with. Like when we started in certain communities where our project was about mining and climate change issues, but we end up having a massive project on agriculture, because we see that the resilience that they need is not just a capacity of being to the state. We disagree with the corporate, or we disagree with policy perspective and about this and that, but is being able to help them to be economically viable as actors, and that gives them a voice that nobody can take from them. And from that perspective, they have a bigger, a better standing in fighting for their rights, and in fighting even against mining companies and oil exploitation companies. So yes, empowerment is a tricky word, but it's really something that we should be doing, both from an economic perspective, but as well from a legal perspective for all communities, but specifically for women and girls. That's what I wanted to add. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Fatima. I saw Chelsea's hand up. Chelsea, if you're there, you have about 40 seconds, because we need to end at 12:30, and we just 4 minutes from our time. So Chelsea,
thank you, Winnie. Actually, thank you for the conversation. Many has been touched, and I thank Robert for his presentation. And on top of what we said, what could be the recommendation? Here in the extractive sector, the issue of transparency and accountability are very complex processes for local communities. And currently, as we talk, we are engaging proactively to empower a local community in Tepeth over the intention of Tororo Cement Factory to construct a clinker. The issue now here is how to empower women structures and demand for a women robust programming initiative that expands incubation that is tailored towards making every member of the community, because we have a complicated process in terms of social corporate responsibility. It comes from the will of the investor. So there is nothing that compels them to pick what the community may not. So for this, realizing equity and equality, we have gone to the extent of compelling our local governments to bring what we call community parliaments as a community education and public awareness programming, because we put barasas, put a group of even more than 50 people and the rest, and bring all the bearers to come and expose what has been in play, and everything is discussed and recorded. So to us, we are now taking actually part of the activity down to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles, for sharing the local example on how you're causing change by engaging both the legislature as well as investors. Fabiana, 30 seconds, and Nelly, I'll give you also 30 seconds, and then
Winnie,
Yes,
there are quite a number of hands up. I don't know if you're seeing them.
I'm not seeing them, but I'm also mindful that of that time.
So maybe we can ask them
give
to
us
type.
about 10 more minutes. Is that
All right.
okay? Can we give ourselves 10 more minutes?
Winnie.
Thank you. Flaviana, please go on.
Yes,
and
yes.
maybe
Just in brief. Just in brief, Winnie.
Yes.
I just want to respond in general, particularly on there's a person who said, oh, how long are we going to discuss about these issues of women?
There's a way you're breaking, Flaviana. There's a way you
yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're loud now.
Yes, please. I was just wanting to just to share a brief that just a little bit. Oh no, someone was asking about how long are we going to discuss about these issues of women and tradition and that sort of things. For me, I think we need to know to take into account that the issue of women in administration and labor relations process is not an overnight thing. So everyone, whoever does something towards women achievement is a contribution. The people who are working on the human rights know this proper, that everyone is putting stone after stone, a brick after a brick, until we get there. So this is a process. Even the issue of capacity building, we don't have to get tired, because the more you capacitate the people, the more they get emancipated. And then we have to keep doing this. And then when it comes again to the issues of traditional, this is an inbuilt system. It's a cultural norms. It's a patriarchal system which has been there for ages. But as we continue building capacity, trying to, that is a management power, trying to liberate people, this is a time that it works. We can see a lot of people coming out, and a lot of people coming and trying to advocate for gender rights, gender issues, women rights in different aspects. And it has worked. And that's why now we cannot compare ourselves in 1960s and today. Things has changed. We see a lot of women are coming in the decision-making table. But when it comes to the executive sector, we see things are still dilly-dallying. But we cannot say that nothing has been done. There are issues which are being done. So we have to continue on fighting and trying to to advocate for the change until we get there. This is a process, and we will never get tired until we get there. And I should say that now, when we discuss about this, now taking the questions of Evans and Gabriel, when they were, I could say that this is a combining effort, both of us, Evans, Gab, and other team, and Robert and all the team, we got to work together and try to see what kind of knowledge are we giving to the women. And you cannot know unless you're working in the extractive sector. You have been there and you've been witnessing about what women are going through. So it's everyone. These are the questions which we need to answer, both of us, and try to attend and try to work on that and try to fight for this kind of gender sensitivity laws, sensitive laws, but also emancipation of women in mining our extractive sector. Thank you so much, Winnie. I really appreciate for giving me this time.
Thank you so much. Nelly, I'm not able to see any hands. Are you seeing some?
Yes, so there is, I don't know if Lanmo, someone said, Risk had said Lanmo had a question, but for now there is Brenda.
Yes, I've enabled him to speak. He has a question in the question answer. I'll can read it out.
And then Brenda, so we have Lanmo, Brenda, Irene. There is someone I think I gave a link to who is using my name. I'm not sure who it is. If you can just type in the chat somewhere. and then we know, then there is Esther, and then there is Rachel. So I think, can we be able to do that in 10 minutes, Winnie, so that we get everyone to at least
Let's
share
have
their-
that 3 questions or contributions, and then we
Okay, so
wrap up.
okay, so they're
So
about
Brenda, can
5.
Brenda go first?
Lanmo is first, and then Brenda. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mary.
And then there are like 4 others.
Because I'm not able to see the hands. Okay, so Mary, please let them, you manage this then on who comes after who. So
Okay,
Lanmo,
sure.
please, and then Brenda will follow.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask my question. I'm a little bit worried. That's why I'm asking, why is that it is taking us too long to improve in terms of meaningful women participation in the extractive governance, considering that this has been discussed for decades? Where exactly are we missing it? Maybe as government policymakers or civil society organization or activists, how best can we improve that? Thank you very much.
So
thank you
can we
very
take Brenda?
Yes.
Brenda is next, Riska. Oh, and then the person using my name is Kathleen. So is Brenda still on? Okay, Kathleen. So Riska, there is someone called Nelly in the on the list, so you can give her an opportunity. It's Kathleen actually who's posting the question. Yeah. So Kathleen, you can go ahead, and then the
I've
next
allowed
one
her to
will
talk.
be Irene. Yeah.
She can go ahead.
Yes, she can. Yeah.
Yes, I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can. You can
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yes, I think this was touched upon by your own comments, Nellie. But I'm very interested to know exactly how important women's roles in extractive industries, which are under really serious reconsideration globally. And being in Canada, I'm watching the turmoil that this creates in the value chains that Canada has traditionally operated. The Supreme Court here has already extended Canadian constitutional rights to gender equality to extraterritorial activities that Canada corporations have stretched out into, their vast number of places of exploitation. But how this is all going to fit into and rank with the growing emphasis on environmental and climate change issues, which have massive implications for women in terms of improving health dimensions of women's existence and their vulnerabilities in the extractive industries. I recognize this is a whole separate kind of set of questions, but I'd be interested to know if anybody has been doing any work that has led them to any conclusions on that.
Thank you, Kathleen. So we need the next person is very quickly Irene, Esther, and then Rachel. And I think that will be the end because we're running out of time. So Irene, yeah, Irene can move. Rather, Riska, you can give Irene to speak. Esther, then Rachel.
Okay, give me 1 minute. So it's Irene.
Irene, yeah,
Okay. Okay, Irene, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much for the discussion. I'm Irene from Uganda. You are talking about how someone can empower women. In my opinion, I think by empowering women, we need to first empower men, because men are the leaders of the family. So there's no way how we can empower women when men, they don't know what women are supposed to do. So through empowering men, telling them what is the responsibility of their wives are supposed to do, I think it will help us as CSOs to improve on empowering women in these extractive industries. And again, through empowering men to empower their women, it will also help in reducing the gender-based violence and the gender inequality that we are facing as as Ugandans or in other countries? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who is next? Irene?
No, Esther, and then
Esther,
Rachel finally. Yes, Esther. Riska, if you can give Esther a chance to speak, and then Rachel, and then
Esther. Okay, you can go ahead.
Esther, please unmute.
Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon. And I want to start off by thanking you for this wonderful report. I think this is one of the reports that we need now, especially organizations like us that are working in the extractive sector. I must say this topic is a very serious challenge, especially in my country, in Sierra Leone. As I speak to you, the 2009 Mines and Mineral Act, there's nothing about women. Even the board that oversee or discuss on issues of extractive, there's no woman there. So these have been our cry, and these have been issues that we've been pushing for a very long time. The only question I have is, how can we be part of this movement? Because somebody actually sent this invitation to me. I'm not sure I'm part of this movement, but I really would like to be part of this movement, because this is what we are working on in mining and women on mining and extractive in Sierra Leone. We are the, for now, the leading women organization working to promote the rights of women in the extractive sector. So we would like to be part of this so that we can consolidate our efforts and also share ideas, as to what to do and how to overcome this challenge. Thank you.
The last person, thank you, Esther. The last person is Rachel, and then we are done. And Flaviana also has her hand up. Okay. So I think Rachel can be added, Riska, so that she's able to speak.
Okay. You can go ahead, Rachel.
Rachel, I don't see Rachel. Have you added her?
Yes. You can go ahead, Rachel.
I don't think she's on.
Okay, so let's have Fabiana then, and
yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I will share the link for the report.
Oh, okay. Where in the chat?
I just feel in system. Just to say thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for giving us this session. It's worth it, and we'll be happy to get the report from all other sides. Thank you so much, guys.
Sorry, Winnie. Sorry, yes. So Rachel has asked that Riska adds Paul so that she's able to say something. I think she will be the last person, and we close.
Okay.
So Riska, if you can just add Paul, and then we close the meeting.
Okay, 1 second. Paul. There you go, Paul.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. This is Rachel. I'm not going to ask a question, Nelly, but rather I just want to provide clarity on some of the questions that are asked, focusing on the Tanzanian report. First of all, the question of whether the revenues have been benefiting men more than women, our research analysis finds out that most of the revenues that are collected are allocated to development projects, which directly or indirectly impact all groups, including women. However, because of the vulnerability of the women and the need to empower women within the sector, we thought there is need to continue to advocate for the government to slate a specific budget that will capacitate women programs across the extractive sector value chain. And this is linked due to the fact that Tanzania has an Empowerment Act of 2004, which among others establishes for a specific fund to promote local participation. Our research findings also show that within this local participation as slated by the Empowerment Act, mainly it's meant to facilitate women who are participating in the value chain across supply of goods and services, but also who are participating direct as miners or extractors within the sector. So when you talk about empowerment, it starts from different angles and different levels. First, there's an angle of policy empowerment, looking at women legitimacy. To what extent have the laws or reforms in Tanzania, for instance, are addressing women representation within different various of decision-making processes? So looking at our laws, it shows that the fact that we do not have specific provisions, but we have other complementing regulations that are calling for women empowerment. So that is why we're also advocating that we need to have spaces on certain levels of management. The other empowerment you're talking about is the actual revenues to fund women who are participating in the value chain. One of our recommendations was that if you look at the, for instance, Mining Commission, there is a representation of Mining Association in Tanzania, FEMATA, but our main aim is the Ministry of Mine recognizes the Tanzania Women Association, for instance. So for us, it's advocating for all women who are actually participating in the extractive sector value addition processes should be given a specific budget through TAWOMA to be able to capacitate these women either on record keeping, either on necessary information that is required for them to access the right information within the sector so that they can participate. Could be through licensing or granting of awards or rights, whatever that form it comes. So it could be more of giving materials, but also giving them technical equipments for those who are already established within different groups, whether in the ASM sector or groups of those who are participating through extraction or those who are participating through supply of goods and services. So that is the kind of empowerment we are looking at. There are a lot of reports. There are a lot of reports that are addressing issues of gender-based violence. And complementing that, we thought that there is need to move beyond discussions on gender-based violences, but documenting value added by women in the supply chain within the extractive sector. I think with that, I would have clarified most of the questions that have been asked, especially for my, I think for my friend Evans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you very much, everyone. Participants from Zimbabwe, Botswana, from the UK, from Canada, from Mozambique, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, Kenya, Senegal, South Africa, and I don't know which country I didn't mention. Thank you so much. We have loved this conversation and we hope to have continuous engagement with the subject beyond just today. But every day we cannot afford to get tired talking about gender, talking about equality, equity, and how men, women, and young people can benefit from our natural resources, particularly the mineral resources. Nelly, please, you have 1 minute to just wrap this up and send us away. Thank you very, very much, everyone. I appreciate your contribution and your participation.
Thank you so much, Winnie. Some hand claps from the audience for Winnie, if you're able to. I think there are some small tabs there we can use. Thank you so much, Winnie, for moderating and for leading the discussion, in this way. And to all the participants from our different places of work and our countries, we really appreciate the time you spent with us. The discussions were really rich, a lot of stuff coming up. And I think it gives a lot more work for the countries that have been involved in this work and even beyond and the 3 countries, because there's so many cross-cutting issues. And I think until these issues are resolved, we're going to continue talking about them. We're going to continue doing research. We're going to continue doing reports and launching reports until we're able to resolve the issues that are really a huge challenge in our communities and in these resource-rich communities. So we've shared the link to the report that sort of pulls together all the 3 countries. However, each of the countries has a very detailed report of the work they've done. And so we will ask them through their networks, through the Publish What You Pay emails, please go ahead and share the country reports as well, so that people can read in detail what transpired through the findings that you shared, and they can be able to read more and understand more the contexts within which those countries are working. However, I think we will also keep in touch over email. We do have some ongoing work with the countries as well. And so there'll be some work, I think, at country level to kind of extend the findings of the issues that have been raised, the recommendations, and try and advance that work at policy and practice level, of course. And so we really appreciate the team from Tanzania, led by Rachel, the team from Uganda, led by Robert, and the team from Mozambique, that was led by Camilo. And of course the team that has taken over right now. So we thank you so much, and we wish you all the best in all your work and your future work, and we will continue getting in touch. Bye everyone, see you, bye. Bye, thank you panelists.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Flaviana. Thank you to
you
the
so much.
interpreters.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bless you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. We'll share the recording later.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.